a bunch of people. This is our kind of examples of the kind of group we hope we'd be able to pull together that would spread across the food system. But I just want to come straight, if I can, to this piece of work to describe that, a sort of hypothesis for how we might be able to collaborate on something that would have systemic impact. And I'm drawing on the work, this report. Anybody who's interested in it, stick a note with your name in the chat, and I'll send you a copy of this report, which is on the idea being that there are, of all the many things we could do in relation to the system, if we can look at some really critical ones that would actually tip the system into a new normal. And that's the idea of positive tipping points that you see on this slide. And this piece of work by the group at Exeter has looked at and identified these 10. Let me just get this other slide of the thing on here. Oh, I'm sorry. These 10 aspects of the system, critical transitions that will make a difference. And right at the top is this area that Helena was talking about. What is the quality of the nutritious food and the nature nutritious food that lands on our tables? But there are also, as it were, other systems that feed into this: production and regenerative agriculture, protecting, restoring nature, and so on. You can read them there on that pyramid. And these are all different aspects of the whole system, and they all need change. But beginning to analyze and categorize them about this helps us, I think, to begin to look for some strategies. And of course, one of the difficulties in addressing this is that we each work in different parts of this system, and the different parts, whether we're academics, researchers, business people, food manufacturers, growers, farmers, cooks, chefs, carers, all of these, we all, in a sense, have different interests, different things we're looking for. How do we tie them all together? And I think that one way to do this is to start really having a look and say, well, where are the key sort of points of purchase, things we can address to make a difference on this? So what I hope we'll be able to do with this system shifters group that we want to convene is to agree on 2 or 3 key things, maybe even just one, that we're really going to have a go at in this kind of list. So which of these will we go for? And the idea is that this diagram represents the system. So where you see that sort of bowl at the top left-hand corner, that's the current way things are, as it were. And there's the way of that little ball, green and blue ball and white with a white rim, sort of represents the normal way of doing things at the moment. And at the moment, we're just 1 or 2 or a few people, well, actually lots of people, have been to think we've got to do something about this. But how do we create the enabling conditions, the kind of circumstances that will enable a lot of people to get together and key people with leverage and power to tip this whole thing so that the normal practices skip into a new way of doing things? And this is really a question around, strategy for change. And this diagram sets out a sort of framework for how one might do that. First of all, we identify the kinds of interventions. That's the first column, interventions for actors to trigger tipping points. And then we need to feed into reinforcing feedback so that the things we do are reinforced by the new system, that we're not fighting against the old system all the time. We've got to make the conditions right so that, for example, the way in which money is in capital is accessed and rewarded, the way in which advertising and regulation on diets supports the kind of nutritious diets and the system we have, and so on. And so we come to the right-hand column, which are these are big level 5 headlines of the conditions that provide systemic tipping points. The new way of doing things has to be economically competitive. The performance must be better than what we have now. The accessibility must be more comprehensive and open than it is now. It has to fit with people's social and cultural norms, what they desire, what they want, what is the kind of diets that we like. And we have to be capable of actually delivering it and doing it. So these 5 conditions must be met in order for things to change. Otherwise, we're just pushing uphill, and it's not going to work. So another way to look at it is this is the familiar innovation curve, and as we know that generally when new ideas come along, if very few people adopt them, and it takes a long time for where the laggards to move. And what we're going to try to do is shift that curve leftward so that more people try to are engaged with and want to be part of new ways of doing things in the food system. So this is what has to happen. We've got to really make a very large scale, as it were, early adoption, accelerated change into this area. So it's got to be very strategic and very well thought through and active. But of course, we can't all just plan it and think it through in our heads. We've got to do it and learn as we go. And this is why we want to get together a broad spectrum of people with lots of knowledge and understanding across the whole system so that we can really do the most effective things. So some examples of those 10 key transition points. Here are 4 of them. That just to give an example: healthy diets, diversifying protein supply, productive and regenerative agriculture, and respecting and restoring nature. And in that report that I mentioned, they look in detail at these in different places. They look at the first 2 in Europe, productive and regenerative agriculture in India, and protecting and restoring nature in various parts of the tropics. Oops, let's just stop getting here. And this is just repeating those 5 conditions I told you about. When we look at healthy diet, just take as an example healthy diets. How would these be made to be economically competitive? Well, they've got to be tasty and convenient alternative proteins, and they've got to be at price parity or better, to conventional meat. I'm not going to go through all of these, but you can see that if you take these 5 conditions: economic competitiveness, performance, accessibility, cultural norms, and capability, and apply to this question about healthy diets, it begins to help us focus on, well, what's the quality it's got to be? What do we got to try to change? So in our system shifters group, we want people who can really help us to address all of these issues, again, in a very strategic way. Now, I'm just going to illustrate this very briefly. You can see in the bottom left-hand corner of that curve, where the curve is still going up quite gently, what we're really looking about here is what's the work that we can do in our system shifters group to get us to that point of acceleration where the curve goes up and new practices and new ways of doing things change. So the fundamental sort of theory of the positive tipping points is we create the conditions such that doing this new way of doing food and food becomes the obvious way, the easiest way to do it. And we've got to get to that. So that's the sort of the work we're doing. Now, looking at that little corner in more detail, let me just go back. It's that corner here in the bottom lower left, represented here, are a whole host of things we've got to deal with. So we've got to deal with performance, we've got to deal with price and convenience, with cultural norms, and as you can see here, and do all sorts of innovations and address questions around regulation, around trade barriers, around transportation and logistics, about advertising, media, all sorts of things to make all of these really happen. So what we're talking about in system shifting is not wishful thinking. Oh, wouldn't it be nice if we were all doing these things? And we're not talking about just picking something randomly because it happens to be easy and convenient. We're talking about a real campaign to actually make this thing change. This is, and this will mean all of us stretching beyond our own organizations, our own current capability, perhaps beyond our own authority, and finding ways to work together to shift these things. But I think if we don't do it, talking about systems change is just wishful thinking. It's just talk if we don't get serious in planning these things. And we will face opposition. There will be a backlash for consumers who say, "I don't want to change what I eat. I like my fries and whatever." There will be a lot of lobbying from people with economic interest who are making money and advantage out of the current ways of doing things. And of course, all of us farmers and growers will also face challenges in changing the way things are done. But they're going to face challenges anyway because the climate is changing and agriculture is under such pressure in any case. So there is an opportunity now to say, look, the old way of doing things is not going to be sustainable anyway. So now's the time to change. And of course, we have to try to get what support we can for them for this. So that's the overall idea about being strategic, purposeful, intentional. And no one person or one group of people can do this alone. We have to draw across the broad spread of expertise and perceptions. For example, the amazing group we have here this afternoon on this call. We need this diversity. So that's the idea. Thanks, Rick.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, for this, explanation in exactly 10 minutes, where you could also work on this for, let's say, 5 weeks course. So brilliantly done. Thanks a lot. And I think it also gives that idea of this huge challenge that we face, and also the urge that if nobody is doing this, then it's not going to change. So we really need to do something, and we really have some tangible levers to work on. So thanks a lot for bringing that up.